Are we live? Let me check this. Okay, everything works well, I guess. Um, just checking if everything is alright, the audio and everything. And then I'm gonna begin my shit. Because I don't want to get muted all the stream, you feel me? Okay, everything is good. Yo, welcome back to another stream. It is currently Thursday on a Thursday. Shit. Well, yeah. Today is gonna be a study stream and a bit of like a little explanation of what functional groups are and how to easy like remember them. And yeah, it's gonna be good. As you can see, already 7 subscribers. Holy shit, almost 10. And honestly, my shorts, both in TikTok and YouTube Shorts, has been very good recently. Almost at 1K views on my YouTube Short, and the most I gotten from TikTok so far is 400 views, which is not that bad, honestly. And yeah. So now let's just chill and just let me explain basically. So I'm making this video, okay? I'm making this video. It's about functional groups. And functional groups are like characters that like pop up in organic chemistry all the time. Like you see them everywhere in all organic molecules. You see them, and so yeah, I'm just doing the cover. After this stream, I'm gonna record my geometry video, so that will be out, and then after that video is out, then this video will be out. So stay tuned for that. I got a lot more coming. I'm just getting started, honestly, because there's a lot more. Since when we're coming to reaction mechanisms, holy shit, buckle up, bro. Okay, so what the hell is a functional group? So you can think of a functional group like a character, basically a character in a video game. So like, have you ever played Mortal Kombat? Like, there's a different characters like Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Noob, and what else? What? Reptile is there? Reptile, right? And what else? The other Mortal Kombat character. What is that? Shit. I don't remember. But what I'm saying is that functional groups are like Mortal Kombat characters. Like, they're characters you see all the time. So you just have to remember how they look like. Like, when I remember Scorpion, I remember yellow, and he has a ninja mask on, and then he just, get over here, and all that shit. So, that's pretty easy. So it's just a lot of memorizing when it comes to formula groups. So yeah, as you can see, I made my little character playing a game, and then he's selecting the compounds. You feel me? So that's a pretty neat way to visualize everything. So let's start off with the alkane. I already screwed up. The alkane. Okay, the alkane is the NPC of all the functional groups. It's basically just a single bond. That's it. Like when you see like this structure, oops, that was an ugly ass. This structure like here, or this structure right here, or this. I'm just drawing zigzag lines at this point. So this structure. So that's an alkane. All right. So it's a very low bottom functional groups. Nobody gives a shit about them. Honestly, they're not that like, whoa, they're so nice and to look at. It's more like they aren't very reactive with stuff. So what's the point, honestly? So yeah, that's the alkane. Pretty NPC molecule. Then we have the alkene. Remember, I said alkane, then alkene, like Harry Kane, and then Harry Keen. Oh, I'm kidding, Harry Kuhn. Okay, so alkene is the lightning rebel. So I just gave them some names to like give them characters, like make them more spicy instead of boring, like saying alkene, blah blah blah. It's only like blah 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 blah. Yeah, nobody gives a shit about that, honestly. So we have here an alkene. Alkene are represented by a double bond, also known as a pi bond, if you want to be more chemistry specific. So it will look like this. Okay, can you get them? Yeah, so it will look like this, like a double bond basically. Okay, that was yeah. So double bond basically. When you see a double bond, just think of alkene. And they also pop a lot in organic compounds. So yeah, so they're everywhere basically. So yeah, that's alkene, the lightning rebel, and they are pretty reactive. So whenever you see an alkene in reaction, boom, it's the nucleophile. It attacks the electrophile. And nucleophile means that it's electron rich. Like you having a lot of money. Like imagine if electrons were money, and the double bond, the alkene has a lot of money since it has a lot of electrons. Then it's a nucleophile. And if something is like a positive charge, like a copper ion, then it's an electrophile, which is poor. And yeah, I'll get it in that in another video. Don't worry about that when we talk about reaction mechanisms. So yeah, it will come. Don't worry. Can't wait. Okay, so then we have alkene, the fire assassin. The reason I said fire assassin because I think of scorpions. Because I think of scorpion whenever I like think of alkene. So alkene is just a triple bond. So whenever you see a triple bond, it's an alkene. Whenever you see a double bond, it's an alkene. And whenever you see a single bond, nobody gives a single shit about, then it's an alkane. Alkane, alkene, alkene. So yeah. And then we have the timeless overload, the benzene ring. The thing you see all the time in organic chemistry. It's over there, and over there, and up my ass, everywhere. Everywhere. So, yeah, it's just a ring. Like, it's just a ring with some double bonds in. And so you'd be like, oh, wait, this one has an alkene, right? So that means it's a functional group. No, this whole thing is a functional group. So you cannot say that this double bond is a functional group since it's connected to a benzene ring. But yeah, you can kind of say it, but it's not that how it works. So this is a benzene. You probably see it a lot in organic chemistry. It's like the head of organic chemistry. You can also see it looks like a head, like a very sad one, like this. Looks like like this sad one. But yeah, that's benzene rings. Then we have alcohol, the drunken brawler. So we all know what alcohol is. We drink, we partying, we like, yeah, alcohol is like very flammable, and people drink it. But yeah, it looks like this. It has, whenever you see an O and an H, like oh shit, I'm so drunk. Like think of that, like oh shit, like oh shit, I'm so drunk. Then it's an alcohol. So yeah, that's alcohol. It comes everywhere in organic chemistry. Whenever you see compounds. Then we have ether, the smoke assassin. So ether is like a molecule that is can't even see chat. There we go. Okay, so ether is like a molecule that is very hydrophobic. What I mean by hydrophobic is that it doesn't mix well with water. So compounds that is hydrophobic doesn't mix well with water, but compounds who are hydrophilic mixes with water. So yeah, this. So whenever you see an oxygen with some carbon atoms, an R means like rest of the molecule. It can be whatever, but think of R as two carbon atoms. So whenever you see like, let me draw it for you. Whenever you see like this structure, then it's an ether. Okay. Then we have alkyl halide, the mercenary. So the reason I said mercenary is because they're like soldiers. They it's like there are four of them, all the halides: fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine, and they are very good leaving groups, which is very beneficial when it comes to E1, E2, SN1, SN2 reactions, which I will also cover in a video. Don't worry about it, we will come to that. But they're good with leaving groups, and they're very electronegative. So, yeah, fluorine is the most electronegative atom in the periodic system, periodic table. Yeah. So there's the mercenary, cold blood killers, and then we have diol, the swamp witch. So a diol is basically an alcohol replaced. The O is replaced by an S. So the S has taken the O's place, and the S is sulfur. So a sulfur has taken the oxygen place. That's a diol. And then we have the aldehyde, the shadow ninja. The aldehyde is like always on the edge of a molecule. So it's never on the center of a molecule. It can never be like this. Like this shit ain't an aldehyde, bro. This one is. Like it has an H. Like it just chills in the corner like this. Yeah. So this is an aldehyde, and you will see it a lot in organic chemistry, since it's a lot of in molecules. So yeah, it's a shadow ninja. It's always on the edge, ready to attack. And then we have. Sorry, I have to burp. Oh shit. Then we have the ketone. Now, the ketone is the king. And what I mean by saying the king, I forgot the damn long periods. My bad. It's important. I also forgot it on here. Shit, my bad. Okay, so the reason is why it's called the king is because it's in the center. It's the center, and then up, and then it has like a lone pair on top and top like a crown. Okay, so you will see a ketone like this. Like let's say we have a molecule like this, cyclohexane. Okay, hexane. Sorry, and then a ketone can be like this. This part right here is a ketone because it's top on the world and it's in the center. All right, it's always in the center. It's never like an aldehyde that can be on the edge of a molecule and then a hydrogen mix. And as you can see, there's R groups. That means it has carbon attached or something else. So yeah, that's a ketone. The king, ketone, one king. So that's how I remember it. Then we have carboxylic acid, the poison queen. So a king needs a queen. You feel me? So the carboxylic acid is the strongest functional group in the hierarchy, like the list. Which one is the top when coming to naming compounds? Carboxylic acid always is the first. So, yeah, it's an acid. It has resonance. Like if you've seen my resonance video, you probably could remember how it looks like. So it's basically just like this shit goes here, this shit goes there, boom, resonance. And yeah, so this is carboxylic acid. It's like yeah, that's how it looks like. So, and there are a lot on amino acids since it ends with acid. And then we have ester, the footballer. So the reason I said footballer, not because it's a joke or like all the other gods like a cool name, the Poison Queen, the King, the Shadow Ninja, all that, and then then this just got like a football. Well, I picture Esther as a woman because hear me out. Hear me out. Esther is a woman name, and esters usually smell good. Women also smell good. Like they use a lot of perfume to smell good to attract others. You feel me? And the reason I said it's a footballer is because it kind of similar resembles the carboxylic acid, but it has an R in right here instead of a H. You feel me? So yeah, so it just has an R instead of an H. Then it's an ester. And the reason why it's a footballer is because if I can, let me show you. If I draw like a ponytail, all right, a ponytail, okay, and then this is her body, and then it's the football right here. Okay, I might sound like a very sick asylum patient right now, but hear me out. Look, this is her head, this is her body, right? This is her body, and this is her leg kicking the ball. And then her right leg right here, and then it's the body right here. As you can see right here. And then she kicks the ball. I'm not insane looking at that, right? So yeah, that's how I remember Esther. She's a football player, and she smells good. Boom, that's an Esther. And yeah. So we have amine, the street brawler. So an amine basically looks like a nitrogen group, either like this. If you see a compound like this, it's an amine. Or if you see a compound like this, it's an amine. Alright? This is also known as a primary amine. But I'll get into a video more depth in that. So yeah, that's an amine. So whenever you see a nitrogen, then you have to think about an amide. Then we have amide, the grandmaster. The one that bends the proteins and the peptide bonds and all that. And in amide, you can see that it kind of and in amide, you can kind of see it resembles the carboxylic acid and ester, but the R is replaced of the nitrogen group. So yeah, so whenever you see a nitrogen or like an amine group with a double bond and a oxygen then it's an amide. Then we have nitrile, the cyber sniper. It kind of resembles like a sniper since its liner, its geometry is liner, and it usually has a triple bond and nitrogen, and just chilling honestly. And yeah, nitriles are with triple bonds, also known as cyno groups, because cyanide, right? So yeah, that's a nitrile. Then we have epoxide, the ring goblin. Now, the reason why I named it the ring goblin is because it's a very unstable molecule. It cannot hold that molecule. It's very explosive, so that's why it's like a goblin, just very aggressive, and it's like the Hobbit, right? The Golem. He's like very aggressive if he doesn't get the ring, so I just named him like that, Ring Goblin, because it's unstable as hell. So yeah, you will definitely see this molecule in organic chemistry if you take organic chemistry. So yeah, there will be like ring opening and like reaction mechanism of them, but I'll make a video of them, of course. Don't worry about that, I got you. So the next one is imine, the mine ninja. So whenever you see a alkene group connected to a nitrogen group, or when you see a nitrogen with a double bond, then it's an amine. Sounds like some iPhone Apple shit. Okay, so yeah, if you see a double bond with nitrogen, then it's an imine. Then we have acid chloride, the berserker. So basically, it looks like an aldehyde, but the H is replaced with an halide. So either fluorine, chlorine, bromine, or iodine. So yeah, it's pretty easy to remember that. And then we have anhydride, the twin overloads. So as you can see, there's two ketones, but in the middle there's an ether. So all that together is an anhydride. And yeah, they're very like rare in organic chemistry to see. So, but yeah, it's definitely good. It's definitely good to remember those two. But yeah, then we have nitro, the explosive diva. Explosive diva. Like they're very like explosive in the name basically. And yeah, so whenever you see a nitrogen with a double bonded O and a single bond O with a negative charge, if you ever see like a positive charge nitrogen and a negative charge O, then it's a nitro group. Done. And then we have thioether, the shadow rouge. So remember when I said what a thiol is? A thiol is when the sulfur atom overtakes the oxygen basically and takes its place. So as you can see right here, the sulfur does the same to an ether, which is like this one right here. It just naps the place and becomes S. That's a thioether. They're also very rare to see in organic chemistry, but yeah, they're there, so it's best to know how they look like. Then we have azide, the silent killer. It's basically a lot of nitrogens and double bonds, and that's pretty much it. They're very rare also to see in organic chemistry, so yeah. Basically. Then I have some practice exercises for the video, honestly. But we can do it right now just for fun and see what the hell we can say. Alright, so we have the first compound. Okay, practice problem. Identify the functional groups in the compounds below. Alright. So, this one right here, what is this? This is an amine group. This one right here, this is a benzene. Okay, you want to fight me or This one is a benzene ring. And this one right here, what was that? That's ester, the footballer. So that's an ester. And yeah, that's the functional groups of the HDH medication. Then we have this type 2 diabetes medication, jardinase, and we can see here, there's an ever here, we see an alkyl halide right here, and we see an ever here. We see a lot of alcohol groups, and yeah, that's basically it. And then an alkane, but nobody gives a shit about those. Alright, then we have, so in we have a nitrogen group, which is amide, and we have ester, the footballer, and then we have an benzene ring, since it's connected. A benzene. That's about it. And we also have an ever, just chilling here. No, wait, we have ester also here. Huh. Okay, so we have a nitrogen group, amine, alkyl halide, and we have a ketone, the king. That's basically. Yeah. Then we have this molecule. Probably you know about it. I don't know. We have a benzene, we have an amine, and we have, what is this? An amide, the grandmaster. So yeah, that's basically it for this one. And then we have this one. We have an alcohol, we have an ever, we have a ketone, we have alcohol, we have nitrogen. Since double bond is all over here, it's not over here. If it was there, then it would be imine. There we go. Oops. So yeah, that's basically functional groups in a nutshell, honestly. But of course, it takes practice to get there. It's not that easy, but with a lot of practice, you will be ripping through those exam sheets like it's papers. Even though it is paper, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's about functional groups. Pretty cool. Just gotta finish the video. I don't know if I'm gonna do face cam too, since you will be distracted by my funny ass, I guess. So okay, my video. Let me show you this one. This one is complete. Honestly, I just need to explain over what the hell I'm saying. So all that SP2, SP3, SP4, no, not SP4, SP2, SP3, and SP. Then we had like a GTA cheat code. Pretty funny shit. And yeah, example and some part patterns and practice problems. So it's best to like go over practice problems, and practice problem over and over again in organic chemistry, since it's basically just that comes up in the exam. And without practice, you cannot do practice. So yeah, SP2, geometry, SP, liner, and then this speed run. And then what happens, blah blah blah, yep. I like they're very pushy, then water. And a little list how to do this shit fast, how to identify the geometry of each atom following value. So yeah, that's about it. And I feel like I feel pretty good about this video. Like I have to balance my education and then also making videos. But the thing is, the thing is in this whole chemistry thing is that I can work with my video while also gaining knowledge on top, which is like the cherry on top when I'm making these videos. So they're not a waste of time, especially not for me though. I'll learn a lot since I'm just like talking to nobody at this point. I might sound schizophrenic, but yeah. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. That was like functional groups. What I wanted to explain, like funny names and how to remember them easily. As to the footballer, come on, my favorite, functional group. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it took me such a long ass time to figure out the difference between an ester and a carboxylic acid, or like those double bonds and then amide, the grandmaster. So shit's hard, bruh, but with a lot of practice, we will get there. Let me think here. Ooh, my other short. My other short. Okay, you can't see shit. My other short just got 300 views. Like, look. Let me show you. Like, see, 400 on this one, 200, nearly 300 if you round it up, 6 likes, and this one 200, and this one, my first ever hit 310, which is insane to me. What the hell happened? Oh, okay, let me just turn it off. Oh yeah, you couldn't even see shit. Wait, let me do this. Okay, so let me show you one more time. Look at this. So nearly 300, 465, 200, nearly also 300, and then we have 310. And honestly, it's impressive numbers to me when I just started all this, and hopefully my plan will work that I can teach a lot of people chemistry easily, and so they will not be scared to make this course, like choose this course, if they want to pursue college. So yeah, everything plays out well so far. So glad about that. But yeah, apparently I got like 2 viewers, but my stream says 0. Maybe it's me like 2 times watching the stream. Yeah, okay, I got 0 viewers, but it says 2. Oh, it means like a total of how many views? Okay, so I watched the stream 2 times. All right, sweet. Um, I think honestly I'm gonna like study, like read a bit, and then yeah, just gonna study a bit. I got royalty, novelty, some let me there we go. Well, we were here with the enzyme kinetics. Alrighty, so enzyme kinetics. Oh shit. The Michaelis-Menten equation. The Michaelis-Menten equation holds for an enzyme E, like the meme E, that combines with the substrate S to form an enzyme substrate complex. ES. EA Sports, basically. No. I'm so stupid. Why didn't I can have my chat. I can have my chat on my phone. Well, so stupid. Even though I don't have any chat, but it's still nice too. Like, I just gotta mute myself. I don't like listening. There we go. This is much better. Okay, so the mic. Wait, I have to charge my. I have to charge my shit. There we go. So it doesn't run out. You feel me? There we go. All right. So all right. So the Michaelis-Menten equation, blah blah blah. Okay. Yes, the enzyme substrate complex can either dissociate back to E and S or go on to form a product P. It is assumed the formation of the product is irreversible, so it doesn't go back. Then we have E plus S, K1, ES, KEP. Okay. For K1 and K2 and K3 are rate constant. For enzymes such as plotting the rate of enzyme reaction versus substrate concentration, S gives a curve. A low substrate concentration, the rate of reaction increases almost proportionally to the substrate concentration. I have to burp so bad. I'm sorry. Whereas a high substrate concentration, the rate becomes almost constant and approaches the maximum rate max, which is independent of substrate concentration. This reflects a situation where there is more substrate present than active sites available, and so increasing the amount of substrate will have little effect. Alright, so we have Km, that is the rate max, the half of the rate max, and then the rate of reaction, the rate max is the rate of reaction. The Michaelis-Menten equation relates the rate of reaction to the substrate concentration for the curve in figure. Okay, nobody gives a shit about that. Rate equals rate max, the concentration of S divided by concentration of S plus Km. The derivation of this equation is not covered here, but can be found in most biochemistry textbooks. The constant Km is known as Michaelis constant and is equal to substrate concentration at which the reaction rate is half of its maximum value. This can be demonstrated as follows. If Km equals the concentration of S, then the Michaelis-Menten equation becomes, alright, this rate, okay. The Km of an enzyme is significant because it measures the concentration of substrate at which half the active sites in the enzyme are filled. This in turn provides a measure of the substrate concentration required for significant catalysis to occur. Km is also related to the rate constant of the enzyme catalyzed reaction. Consider now the situation where there is rapid equilibration between S and ES and a slower conversion like the fucking shoe, the product P. This means that the substrate binds to the active site and deports several times before it finally converted to product. Under these conditions, the dissociation rate K2 of ES is much greater than the rate of formation of product K3. K3 now becomes insignificant relative to K2, and the equation simplifies to the following. Km, okay. In this situation, Km effectively equals the dissociation constant of ES and can be taken as a measure of how strongly the substrate binds to the enzyme. Alright, interesting. A high value of Km indicates weak binding because the equilibrium is pushed to the right. A low Km indicates a strong binding because the equilibrium is to the left. Km is also dependent on the particular substrate involved and on environment conditions such as pH, temperature, and ionic strength. The maximum rate is relative to the total concentration of enzyme as follows. Alright. A knowledge of the maximum rate and the enzyme concentration allows the determination of K3. For example, the enzyme carbonic anhydrase catalyzes the formation of hydrogen carbonate and does so at a maximum rate of 0.6 moles of hydrogen carbonate molecules formed per second for a solution containing 10 squared minus 6 moles of the enzyme. Alternating the previous equation, K3 can be determined as follows. Alright. Therefore, each enzyme is catalyzing the formation of 600,000 hydrogen carbonate molecules per second. The turnover number is the time taken for each catalyzed reaction to take place. That is 1 divided by 600,000 equals 1.7 nanoseconds. Holy shit. Alright, Lineweaver-Burk plots. A problem related to Michaelis-Menten kinetics is the fact that there will not be a sufficient data points to determine whether the curve of a Michaelis-Menten plot has reached a maximum value or not. This means the values of the maximum rate and Km are likely to be inaccurate. More accurate values for these properties can be obtained by plotting the reciprocals at the rate of the substrate concentration to get a Lineweaver-Burk plot. Alright, so it's like a linear graph. I had this in high school, by the way, so I think I know what the hell they're talking about. The maximum rate can be obtained from the intersect of the line with the y-axis, while Km can be obtained from the slope of the line or the intersect with the x-axis. The Michaelis-Menten equation relates to the rate of enzyme catalyzed reaction to substrate concentration. The Michaelis constant is equal to the substrate concentration at which the rate of the enzyme catalyzed reaction is half its maximum value. The Lineweaver-Burk plot provides more accurate values for the maximum rate and Km. Then we have some questions. Further reading. Receptors, structure and function. Right. Role of the receptor. Receptor proteins are by far the most important drug targets in medicine. They are Okay. In a complex organism, there has to be a communication system between cells, and after all, it would be pointless if individual heart cells were to contract at different times. The heart will be then a wobbly jelly and totally useless in its function as a pump. Communication is essential to ensure that all heart muscle cells contract at the same time. The same true for all the organs and tissues of the body if they are to operate in a coordinated and controlled fashion. I can hear myself. Yeah, okay, so control and communication come primarily from the brain and spinal column, the central nervous system, which receives and sends message via a vast network of nerves. The detailed mechanism by which nerves transmit messages along their length need to concern us here is sufficient for our purposes to think of a message as being an electrical pulse that travels down the nerve cell, the neuron, towards the target, whether that could be a muscle cell or another neuron. If that was all there was to it, it would be difficult to imagine how drugs could affect this communication system. However, there is one important feature that is crucial to an understanding of drug action. Neurons do not connect directly to the target cells. They stop just short of the cell surface. The distance is infinitesimal, about 100 Armstrong, but it's space that the electrical pulse is unable to jump. Okay, then we have the nervous system, pretty nervous. Therefore, there has to be a method of carrying the message across the gap between the nerve ending and the target cell. The problem is solved by a release of chemical messenger called a neurotransmitter from the nerve cell. Once released, this chemical messenger diffuses across the gap to the target cell, where it binds and interacts with specific protein, called receptors, embedded in the cell membrane. This process of binding leads to a series of cascade of secondary effects which result either in a flow of ions across the cell membrane or in the switching on or off of enzyme inside the target cell. A biological response then results, such as the concentration of the muscle cell of or the activation of fatty acid metabolism in a fat cell. Alright, so we can see the neuron goes in, the signal goes there, the messenger goes out the neuron in the receptor, boom, and then it gets the response. Okay. In 1905, Langley was the first person to propose the existence of receptors. Up until that point, it was thought that drugs acted to prevent the release of a neurotransmitter from the neuron. But Langley showed that certain target cells responded to the drug nicotine, even when the neurons supplying those cells were dead. So far, we have talked about cellular communication involving neurons and neurotransmitters, but cells also receive chemical messages from circulating hormones. Once again, receptors are responsible for binding these messengers and triggering a series of secondary effects. Chapter 5 considers these secondary effects and how they result in biological action, but for the moment, the important thing to note is that the communication system depends crucially on the chemical messenger. As a chemical process is involved, it should be possible for other chemicals, drugs, to interfere or interact with the process. Alright, then we have something about neurotransmitters and hormones. There are a large variety of messengers that interact with receptors, and they vary significantly in structure and complexity. Some neurotransmitters are simple molecules, such as monoamides, noradrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin, or amino acids. Even the calcium ion can act as a chemical messenger. Other chemical messengers are more complex in structure and include lipids such as prostaglandins, purines such as adenosine or ATP, adenosine triphosphate, neuropeptides such as endorphins, peptide hormones such as angiostensin, and all that, and even enzymes such as thrombin. Alright, so we have these neurotransmitters. In general, a neuron releases mainly one type of neurotransmitter, and the receptor that awaits it on the target cell will be specific for that messenger. However, that does not mean the target cell has only one type of receptor protein. Each target cell has a large number of neurons communicating with it, and they do not release at the same neurotransmitter. Therefore, the target cell will have other types of receptors specific for those other neurotransmitters. It may also have receptors waiting for receive messengers from chemical messengers that had longer distance to travel. These are the hormones released into a circulatory system by various glands in the body. The best known example for a hormone is adrenaline. When danger or exercise is anticipated, the adrenal medulla gland releases adrenaline into the bloodstream, where it's carried around the body, preparing the vigorous exercise. Okay, interesting. Hormones and neurotransmitters can be distinguished by their route they travel, and by the way they are released, but their action when they reach the target cell is the same. They both interact with the receptor and message is received. The cell responds to that message and adjusts its internal chemistry accordingly, and biological response results. Receptor types and subtypes. Receptors are identified by the specific neurotransmitter or hormone that activates them. Thus, the receptor activated by the dopamine is called dopaminergic receptor. The receptor activated by the acetylcholine is called cholinergic receptor, and the receptor activated by adrenaline or noradrenaline is called adrenergic receptor or adrenergic receptor. What a mouthful. However, not all receptors activated by the same chemical messenger are exactly the same throughout the body. For example, the adrenic receptors in the lungs are slightly different from the adrenic receptors in the heart. These differences arise from the slight variation. I have to burp so bad. From slight variation in amino acid composition, and if the variation are in the binding site, it allows the medicinal chemist to design drugs that can distinguish between them. For example, adrenic drugs can be designed to be a lung or heart selective. In general, there are various types of particular receptors and various subtypes of these, which are normally identified by numbers or letters. Having said that, some of the early receptors discovered were named after the natural products that bound to them. For example, the muscarinic and nicotinic types of cholinergic receptors. Shows figure 4.16 shows some example of receptors, types, and subtypes. The identification of many of these subtypes will relatively recent, and the current emphasis of medical chemistry is to design drugs that are as selective as possible for receptor types and subtypes, so the drugs are tissue selective and have fewer side effects. How much is it? Oh, okay, it's just like a bit. Okay. Okay, so receptor activation. A receptor is a protein molecule usually embedded within the cell membrane, which is a part of the structure exposed on the outside of the cell. The protein surface is a complicated shape containing hollows, rivetings, and ridges, and somewhere within this complicated geography there is an area that has the correct shape to accept the incoming messenger. This area is known as the binding site and is analogous to the active site of an enzyme. When the chemical messenger fits into this site, it switches on the receptor molecule and the message is received. However, there is an important difference between enzymes and receptors in that chemical messenger. The chemical messenger does not undergo a chemical reaction. It fits into the binding site of the receptor protein, passes on the message, and then leaves uncharged. If no reaction takes place, what has happened? How does the chemical messenger tell the receptor its message, and how is the message conveyed to the cell? The first thing to note is that when the messenger fits the binding site of the protein receptor, it causes binding sites to change shape. This is known as induced fit. This, in turn, has wider ramifications since there is a knock-on effect that causes the overall protein to change shape. But how did this induced fit happen, and what is the significance of the receptor changing shape? Interesting. Now, How does the binding site change shape? As discussed, the binding site of the receptor changes shape when the chemical messenger fits into it. This is not a molding process in which the um This is not a molding process in which the binding site wraps itself around the messenger. Instead, the induced fit is brought about by the intermolecular binding interaction that take place between messenger and binding site. This is exactly the same process that occurs when the substrate binds to the active site of an enzyme, but in this situation, no catalyzed reaction follows binding. To illustrate how binding interactions result in an induced fit, let us consider a hypothetical neurotransmitter and a hypothetical binding site as shown in figure 4.6. The neurotransmitter has an aromatic ring that can take part in van der Waals interactions, an alcohol OH group that can take part in hydrogen bonding interactions, and a charged nitrogen center that can take part in ionic or electrostatic interactions. These functional groups are the messenger's binding groups. Alright, so benzene is a binding group and a positive charge amide. Okay. The hypothetical binding site contains three binding regions, which contains functional groups that are complementary to the binding points. Binding groups of the messenger. The messenger fits into binding sites such as intermolecular interaction take place between the messenger's binding groups and the receptor binding regions. However, the fit is not perfect in the diagram. There are good van der Waals and hydrogen bond interaction, but the ionic interaction is not strong as it could be. The ionic binding region is close enough to have a weak interaction with the messenger, but not close enough for the optimum interaction. The receptor protein, therefore, alters shape to bring the carboxylate group closer to the positively charged nitrogen and to obtain a stronger interaction. As a result, the shape of the binding site is altered and an induced fit has been taken place. Okay. Figure 4.7 is a simplification of the induced fit process, and in reality, both messenger and the binding site take up different conformation or shape to maximize the bonding force between them. As with enzyme substrate binding, there is a fine balance involved in receptor-messenger binding. The bonding forces must be large enough to change the shape of the binding site, but not strong that the messenger is unable to leave. Most neurotransmitters bind quickly to the receptors, then shake themselves loose once the message has been received. We have now seen how a chemical messenger can cause an induced fit in the binding site of the receptor protein. However, this induced fit has a knock-on effect that alters the overall shape of the protein. It is this overall shape change that is crucial to the activation of the receptor and its ability to trigger an amazing domino effect that affects the cell's internal chemistry. This domino effect involves several different proteins and enzymes and ultimately produces an observed biological effect. The process by which it takes place is called signal transduction. Covered in more detail. Okay, nobody gives a shit. Signal amplification is an important feature of this process since this means that it's relatively small number of neurotransmitters molecule that can have a dramatic effect on the cell's internal chemistry. Alright. There are three main types or families of membrane bound receptors: ion channel receptor, G protein coupled receptors, and kinase link receptors. Key points. Most receptors are membrane-bound proteins which contains an internal binding site for hormones or neurotransmitters. Binding results in an induced fit that changes the receptor conformation. This triggers a series of events that ultimately result in a charge of cellular chemistry. Neurotransmitters and hormones do not undergo a reaction when they bind to receptors. They depart the binding site unchanged once they have passed on the message. The interaction that binds a chemical messenger is the binding site must be strong enough to allow the chemical message to be received, but weak enough to allow the messenger to depart. Binding groups are the functional groups present on the messenger molecule that are used for binding into the receptor binding site. Binding regions are regions of the receptor binding site that contain functional groups or substituent capable of forming intermolecular bonds to the binding groups or messenger molecule. Alright. Okay, so I'm almost done with that shit. Alright, let's log in. Okay. Alright. Some neurotransmitters operate by controlling ion channels. What are these ion channels and why are they necessary? Let's look again at the structure of a cell membrane. Describe how the membrane is made of a bilayer of phospholipids molecule, and so the middle of the cell membrane is fatty and hydrophobic. Such barrier makes it difficult for polar molecules or ions to move in or out of the cell. Yet, it is important that these pieces should cross. For example, the movement of sodium and potassium ions across the membrane is crucial to the function of nerves. It seems an intractable problem, but once again, the ubiquitous proteins provide the answer by forming ion channels. Ion channels are complexes made up of protein subunits which traverse the cell membrane. The center of the complex is hollow and is lined with polar amino acids to give hydrophilic tunnel or pore. Alrighty. Ions can cross the fatty barrier of the cell membrane by moving through these hydrophilic channels or tunnels, but there has to be some control. In other words, there has to be a lock gate that can be opened or closed as required. It makes sense that this lock gate should be controlled by receptor proteins sensitive to external chemical messenger. And this is exactly what happens. In fact, the receptor protein is integral part of the ion channel complex and is one more of a continuous protein subunits. In the resting state, the ion channel is closed. Example, the lock gate is shut. However, the chemical messenger binds to the external binding site of the receptor protein. It causes a induced fit, which results in the protein changing shape. This in turn causes the overall protein complex to change shape, opening up the lock gate and allowing ions to pass through the ion channel. We shall look at this more in... Okay. The operation of the ion channel explains why the relatively small number of neurotransmitter molecules released by a neuron is able to have such a significant biological effect on the target cell. By opening a few ion channels, several thousand ions are mobilized for each neurotransmitter molecule involved. Moreover, the binding of a neurotransmitter to an ion channel results in a rapid response, measured in a matter of milliseconds. This is why the synaptic transmission of signals between neurons usually involves in ion channels. Ion channels are specific for certain ions. For example, there are different cation channels for sodium, potassium, and calcium ions. There are also anionic ion channels for the chloride ion. Chloride. The ion selectivity for different ion channels is dependent on the amino acid lining the ion channel. The ion selectivity, blah blah blah, is dependent on the amino blah blah blah, and it is interesting to note that the mutation of just one amino acid in this area is sufficient to change a cationic selective ion channel or to one that is selective for anions. The protein subunits that make up the ion channel are actually glycoproteins, but we will refer them here as proteins. The protein subunits in the ion channel are not identical. For example, the ion channel controlled by the nicotinic cholinergic receptor is made up of 5 subunits of 4 different types: 2 alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. The ion channel controlled by the glycine receptor is made up of 5 subunits of 2 different types: 3 alphas and 2 betas. Okay. Now let's concentrate on the individual protein subunits. Although there are various types of these, they all fold up in similar manner, such as the protein chain traverses the cell membrane 4 times. This means that each subunit has 4 transmembrane (TM) regions that are hydrophobic in nature. These are labeled TM1, TM4. There is also a lengthy N-terminal extracellular chain that in case of an alpha subunit contains a ligand binding site. Right. Gating. When the receptor binds a ligand, it changes shape, the induced fit. This is a knock-on effect of the protein complex, causing the ion channel to open, a process called gating. Okay, so the messenger just hops in the binding site, and then the gate opens basically for the ions. The binding of a neurotransmitter to its binding site causes a conformational change in the receptor, which eventually opens up the central pore and allows ions to flow. This conformational change is quite complex, involving several knock-on effects from this internal binding process. This must be so as the binding site is quite far from the lock gate. Studies have shown that the lock gate is made up of 5 kinked alpha helices, the 2 TM regions, where 1 2-TM helix is contributed by each of the 5 protein subunits. In the closed state, the kinks are pointing throughout each other. The conformational charge induced by the ligand binding causes each of these helices to rotate such as the kink points the other way, thus opening the pore. Cell membrane. Okay. Okay, so that's how it looks like block. Funny. The ligand-gated and voltage-gated ion channels. The ion channels that we have discussed so far are called ligand-gated ion channels, and they are controlled by chemical messengers, ligands. There are all other types of ion channels that are not controlled by ligands, but are sensitive instead of the potential difference that exists across a cell membrane. The membrane potential, these ion channels are present in the axon of excitable cells, excitable neurons, are called voltage-gated ion channels. They are crucial to the transmission of signal along individual neurons and we important drug targets for local anesthetics. Appendix 4 provides a description of these ion channels. Voltage-gated ion channels also play an important role in controlling blood pressure and heart rate. Key points. Receptors controlling ion channels are an integral part of the ion channel. Binding of a messenger induces a change in shape which results in rapid opening of an ion channel. Receptors controlling ion channels are called ligand-gated ion channel. Receptors that consist of 5 protein subunits with the receptor binding site being present on one or more of the subunits. Binding of a neurotransmitter to an ion channel receptor causes a conformational change in the protein subunits such as the second transmembrane domain of each subunit rotated to open the channel. G protein coupled receptors. General principle. The G protein coupled receptors, GPCRs, are some most important drug targets in medicinal chemistry. Indeed, some 30% of all drugs on the market act by binding to these receptors. They include muscarinic receptor, adrenergic receptors, and opioid receptors. The response from activated GPCRs is measured in seconds. This is slower than the response of ion channels, but faster than the response of kinase-linked receptors, which takes a matter of minutes. There are a large number of different GPCRs interacting with important neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, dopamine, histamine, serotonin, and glutamate, and noradrenaline. Other GPCRs are activated by peptide and protein hormones such as enkephalins and endorphins. GPCRs are membrane-bound proteins that can activate proteins called G proteins. The G proteins then fragment as it act as a signal protein to activate or deactivate membrane-bound enzymes. Consequently, activation of a GPCR by a chemical messenger triggers a process that influences the reactions that take place within the cell. The GPCR protein is embedded within the membrane, which is the binding site for the chemical messenger exposed on the outer surface. On the inner surface, there is another binding site, which is normally closed. When the chemical messenger binds to the binding site, the GPCR protein changes shape, opening up the binding site on the inner surface. The new binding site is recognized by the G protein, which then binds. The G protein is attached to the inner surface of the cell membrane and is made up of 3 protein subunits. But once it binds to GPCR, the complex is destabilized and fragments through monomer and a dimer. These then interact with membrane-bound enzymes to continue the signal transduction process. Okay. There are several different G proteins which are recognized by different types of receptor. Some of them activated subunits from these G proteins have an inhibitory effect on the membrane-bound enzyme, while others have a stimulatory effect. Nevertheless, the mechanism by which the G protein is activated by fragmentation is the same. There is also a substantial amplification of the signal in this process as one activated receptor activates several G proteins. The G. Oh shit, we got a viewer. Or is it me two times? I don't know. The G structure of the G protein coupled receptors. The GPCR fold up within the cell membrane, such as the protein chain winds back and forth through the cell membrane 7 times. Each of the 7 transmembrane sections is hydrophobic and helical in shape, and it's usual to assign these helices with Roman numerals. So 1, 2, okay. Starting from the N terminus of the protein. Owing to the number of transmembrane regions, the G proteins are also called 7T-TM receptors. The binding site for the G protein is situated on the intermolecular side of the protein and involves part of the C-terminal chain as well as a part of the variable intercellular loop, so called because the length of this loop varies between types of receptors. As expected, the binding site for the neurotransmitter or hormone messenger is one extracellular portion of the protein. The exact position of the binding site varies from receptor to receptor. For example, the binding site for the androgenic receptor is a deep binding pocket between the transmembrane helices, whereas the binding site for the glutamate receptor involved in the N-terminal chain and is situated above the surface of the cell membrane. You that are watching right now, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the stream. Currently just studying, reading some chapters. If it's a random person or not me, then I'm honestly honored because, yeah, okay, Luke, you can make. Yeah, anyway. Okay, anyway, 4.7 point. The GPCR include the receptor for some of the best known chemical messengers in medicinal chemistry. Example, glutamic acid, GABA, noradrenaline, dopamine, and acetylcholine, serotonin, and all that bullshit. Considering the structural variety of the chemical messenger involved, it is remarkable that the overall structure of the GPCR are so similar. Nevertheless, despite the similar overall structure, the amino acid sequence of the receptor varies quite significantly. This implies that the GPCR has evolved over millions of years from an ancient common ancestral protein. Comparing the amino acid sequences of the GPCRs allows us to construct an evolutionary tree and to group the receptors of this superfamily into various subfamilies, which are defined as class A, rhodophosphin-like receptors, class B, serpentine-like receptors, and class C, metabotropic glutamate-like and pheromone receptors. The most important of these, as far as medicinal chemistry is concerned, is the like family, so called because the first receptor of this family to be studied in detail was what the hell is this? Rhodopsin receptor itself. A receptor involved in the visual process, a study of the evolutionary tree of the. Okay. Oh shit. Okay. It's the evolutionary theory of a G protein coupled receptors. There's a lot. First of all, the evolutionary theory illustrates the similarity between different kinds of GPCRs based on their relative position on the tree. Thus, the muscarinic, alpha-adrenic, beta-adrenic, histamine, and dopamine receptors has evolved from the common branch of the evolutionary tree and have greater similarity to each other than to any receptors arising from the earlier evolutionary branch. Example, the angiotensin receptors. Such receptor similarity may prove a problem in the medicinal chemistry, although the receptors are distinguished by different neurotransmitters or hormones in the body. A drug may not manage to take the distinction. Therefore, it is important to ensure that any new drug aimed at one kind of receptor, example the dopamine receptor, does not interact with a similar kind of receptor, example the muscarinic receptor. Receptors have further evolved to give receptor types and subtypes that recognize the same chemical messenger but are structurally different. For example, there are two types of adrenic receptors, alpha and beta, each of which has various subtypes. Alpha 1, alpha 2A, alpha 2B, alpha 2C, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. There are two types of cholinergic receptors, nicotinic, an ion channel receptor, and a muscarinic, a 7T-M receptor. There are 5 identified subtypes of muscarinic cholinergic receptor. The existence of receptor subtypes allows the possibility of designing drugs that are selective for one receptor subtype over another. This is important because one receptor subtype may be prevalent in one part of the body, except the gut, while a different receptor subtype is prevalent in another part, except the heart. Therefore, a drug that is designed to interact selectively with the receptor subtype in the gut is less likely to have side effects on the heart, even if the different receptor subtypes are present in the same part of the body. It is still important to make drugs as selective as possible because different receptor subtypes frequently activate different signaling systems, leading to different biological results. A closer study of evolutionary tree reveals some curious facts about origins of receptor subtypes. As expected, various receptor subtypes has diverged from a common evolutionary branch. Example, dopamine subtype D1, D2, D3, D4. This is known as divergent evolution, and there should be a close structural similarity between these subtypes. However, receptor subtypes are also found in separate branches of the tree. For example, the dopamine receptor subtype D1A, D1B, and D5 have developed from a different evolutionary branch. In other words, the ability of a receptor to bind dopamine has developed in different evolutionary branches. An example of convergent evolution. Consequently, there may sometimes be greater similarities between receptors that bind different ligands and have evolved from the same branch of the tree than there are between the various subtypes of receptors which bind the same ligand. For example, the histamine H1 receptor resembles a muscarinic receptor more closely than it does the histamine H2 receptor. Again, this has an important consequence in drug design because there is increased possibility that a drug aimed at a muscarinic receptor may also interact with histamine H1 receptor and lead to unwanted side effects. As these receptors are membrane bound, it's not easy to crystallize them from X-ray crystallographic studies. However, the X-ray crystal structures of various membrane-bound receptors have now been determined, including the beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. Androceptors. The dimerization of G-coupled receptors. There is strong evidence that some G-coupled receptors can exist as a dimeric structure containing identical or different types of receptor homodimes or heterodimes, respectively. The presence of these receptor dimes appears to vary between different tissues, and this has important consequences for the drug design. An agent that is selective for the one type of receptor will not normally affect other types. However, if receptor heterodimes are present, a communication is possible between the component receptors, such as the agent interaction with one half of the dimer may affect the activity of the other half. Discusses. Okay. Key points: G protein coupled receptors. GPCRs activate signal proteins called G proteins. Binding of a messenger result in the opening of a binding site for the signal protein. The latter binds and fragments with one of subunits deporting to activate a membrane-bound enzyme. The GPCR are membrane-bound proteins with 7 transmembrane sections. The C-terminal chain lies within the cell, and the N-terminal chain is extracellular. The location of the binding site differs between different GPCRs. The ribosine-like family of GPCRs includes many receptors that are targeted for currently important drugs. Receptor types and subtypes recognize the same chemical messenger but have structural differences. This makes it possible to design drugs that are selective for one type or subtype of receptor over another. Receptor subtypes can arise from divergent or convergent evolution. It is possible for some GPCRs to exist as dimeric structures. Okay. Almost done with receptors. I got over to you, somebody. All right. So, kinase receptors, general principles. Kinase receptors are a superfamily of receptors that activate enzymes directly and do not require a G protein. Tyrosine kinase receptors are important examples for such receptors and are proving to be highly important targets for novel anti-cancer drugs. The protein concerned plays the dual role of receptor and enzyme. The receptor protein is embedded within the cell membrane, which is a part of the structure exposed on the outer surface of the cell and part exposed on the inner surface. Oh. Where was I? Where was I? An important example of such receptors are proving to be highly important targets for the novel anti-cancer drugs. The protein concerned plays the dual role of receptor and enzyme. The receptor protein is embedded within the cell membrane, which part of its structure exposed on the outer surface of the cell and part exposed on the inner surface. The outer surface contains the binding site for the chemical messenger, and the inner surface has an active site that is closed in a resting state. When a chemical messenger binds to the receptor, it causes the protein to change shape. This shape change results in active site opening, allowing the protein to act as an enzyme within the cell. The catalyzed reaction is a phosphorylation reaction where tyrosine residues on a protein substrate are phosphorylated. An enzyme that catalyzes phosphorylation reactions is known as kinase enzyme, and so the protein is referred as tyrokinase receptor. ATP is ATP is required as a cofactor to provide the necessary phosphate group. The active site remains open as long as the messenger molecule is bound to the receptor, and so several phosphorylation reactions can occur, resulting in the amplification of the signal. A curiosity of this enzyme catalyzed reaction is that the substrate for the reaction is the receptor itself. Okay. So the messenger goes into the receptor, open the active site, and the kinase can do its job. All right. Tyrosine kinase receptors can be a single protein as described, or a protein complex, where one protein acts as a receptor and another acts as a kinase. Tyrosine kinase receptors are activated by a large number of polypeptide hormones, growth factors, and cytokines. Loss of function of these receptors can lead to development defects or hormone resistance. Overexpression can result in malignant growth disorder. Structure of tyrosine kinase receptors. The basic structure of single protein tyrosine kinase receptor consists of extracellular region, the N-terminal chain, that includes the binding site for the chemical messenger, a single hydrophobic region that traverses the membrane as an alpha helix of 7 turns, just sufficient to traverse the membrane, and a C-terminal chain on the inside of the cell membrane. The C-terminal region contains the catalytic active site for kinase activity. Examples for tyrosine kinase receptors like this included the receptors for the hormones, epidermal growth factor, and vascular endothelial growth factor. Okay, buddy. I got loyalty and royalty inside my DNA. Activation mechanism for tyrosine kinase receptors. A specific example of a tyrosine kinase receptor is the epidermal growth factor receptor, EGFR. As the name suggests, the endogenous ligand for EGFR is epidermal growth factor EGF, which is a bivalent ligand that can bind to 2 IGF receptors at the same time. This results in receptor demerceration as well as activation of enzymatic activity. The demerceration process is important because the active site on each half of the receptor dimer catalyzes the phosphorylation of accessible tyrosine residues on other half. If dimerization didn't occur, no phosphorylation will take place. Note that here phosphorylation occurs on the intermolecular portion of the receptor protein chain. Section 541 explains the relevance of these phosphorylation reactions. The important point to grasp at this stage is that the external chemical messenger has managed to convey its message to the interior of the cell without itself being altered or having to enter the cell. Interesting. Demerceration, autophosphorylation, is a common theme for tyrokinase receptors. However, some of the receptors in this family already exist as dimers or tetramers and only require binding of the ligand. For example, the insulin receptor is a tetramic complex. Okay. Some tyrosine kinase receptors bind ligands and dimerize in a similar fashion to those described earlier, but do not have inherent catalytic activity in the C-terminal chain. However, once the dimerize dimerize, they combine an active and they combine and activate a tyrosine kinase enzyme from the cytoplasm. The growth hormone receptor is an example of this type of receptor. Growth hormone (GR) is an example of family of chemical messenger called cytokines, which include important polypeptide and protein chemical messengers. For example, interleukins, interferons, erythropoietin (EPO), and thrombopoietin, and prolactin and colony stimulating factor. There are a corresponding variety of cytokine receptors that respond to these cytokines. Several of these cytokine receptors bind intercellular kinases known as Janus kinases. JAK. There are 4 members of JAK family labeled JAK1, JAK2, JAK3, and TYK4. And the types of Janus kinase present in the activated receptor complex depend on the individual receptor involved. See also, okay. Yeah, I don't need to read all this. Key points. Tyrosine kinase receptors have an extracellular binding site for chemical messengers and an intracellular enzymic active site that catalyzes the phosphorylation of tyrosine residues in protein substrate. Ligand binding to the epidermal growth factor (EGF) receptors results in demerization and opening of kinase active sites. The active site, one on half of the dimer, catalyzes the phosphorylation of tyrosine residues present on the C-terminal chain of the other half. The insulin receptor is performed heterotetramic structure that acts as a tyrosine kinase receptor. The growth hormone receptor demises on binding its ligand, then binds an activates tyrosine kinase enzymes from the cytoplasm. Several tyrosine kinase receptors are important drug targets for anti-cancer drugs. Intracellular receptors. Not all receptors are located in the cell membrane. Some receptors are within the cell and defined as intracellular receptors. There are about 50 members of this group, and they are particularly important in directly regulating gene transcription. As a result, they are often called nuclear hormone receptors or nuclear transcription factors. The chemical messenger for these receptors includes steroid hormones, thyroid hormones, and retinoids. All of these cases, the messenger has to pass through the cell membrane in order to reach its receptor, and so it has to be hydrophobic in nature. The response time resulting the activation of the intracellular receptors is measured in hours or days, and is much slower than the response times of the membrane-bound receptors. The intracellular receptors have all similar general structures. They consist of single protein containing a ligand binding site at the C-terminal and a binding region of DNA near the center. The DNA binding region contains 9 cysteine residues, 8 of which are involved in binding to zinc ions. The zinc ion plays a crucial role in stabilizing and determining the conformation of the DNA binding region. As a result, the stretches of protein concerned are called zinc finger domains. The DNA binding region for each receptor can identify particular nucleotide sequences in DNA. For example, The zinc finger domain, the estrogen receptor, recognizes the sequence 5-AGGTCAG, where A, G, C, and T are adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. The mechanism by which intercellular receptors work is also very similar. Once the chemical messenger ligand has crossed all the cell membrane, it seeks out the receptor and binds to it at the ligand binding site. An induced fit takes place, which causes the receptor to change shape. This in turn leads to the dimerization of the ligand receptor complex. The dimer then binds to a protein called a co-activator, and finally the whole complex binds to a particular region of the cell's DNA. As there are two receptors in the complex and two DNA binding regions, the complex recognizes two identical sequences of nucleotides in the DNA, separated by a short distance. For example, the estrogen ligand receptor dimer binds to a nucleotide sequence of 5-AGGTCANNNTGACCT3. Alright, where N can be any nucleic acid base. Depending on the complex involved, binding of the complex to the DNA either triggers or inhibits the start of transcription and affects the eventual synthesis of the protein. Section 3.6 covered the role of allosteric binding sites in the regulatory activity of enzymes. Allosteric binding sites also plays a role in regulating or modulating the activity of various receptors. These include ligand-gated ion channels such as nicotinic and gamma-aminobutyric acid receptors, and several GPCRs such as the muscarinic, adenosine, and dopamine receptors. Structures that interact with these sites are called allosteric modulators and can either enhance or decrease the effects of the chemical messenger on the receptor. Genetic polymorphism and receptors. Section blah 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 discuss genetic polymorphism. Polymorphism is also responsible for receptors having subtle differences in structure and activity between individuals. Some cases this can lead to disease like cancer. Key points. Intracellular receptors are located within the cell and important in controlling transcription. Alright. The chemical messenger for intracellular receptors must be sufficiently hydrophobic to pass through the cell membrane. Alright. The binding of a ligand with an intracellular receptor results in dimerization and the formation of a transcription factor complex that binds to a specific nucleotide sequence on the DNA. Alright. And then that's the chapter. So next stream is about receptors and what signal transit. Alright. This should be good. Oh. Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna end stream now. It was a pretty nice chill stream, almost 2 hour stream, but it is what it is. And yeah, so now I'm gonna record my video about geometry. Hopefully you will like it. It's gonna be good. Why the hell is my cam? What? Okay, so my cam is alright. I hope you enjoyed the stream about the start, which I explained what functional groups are and how to memorize it more easily. I will make a video. Don't worry, I will make a video for that. But yeah, it was just a fun thing. I enjoyed it. But yeah, now I'm gonna record my video about geometry, and yeah, I hope you're doing well there. And yeah, um, I have no idea what to say, but um, if future me look back to this stream, I will tell him that it's gonna be worth everything what you're gonna do in the end. So what you're gonna do, like streaming right now, all this chemistry, your whole niche basically, it will be worth in the end. Don't worry, and it will be worth it. I'm not gonna stop anytime soon. I'm definitely not gonna stop. I'm just getting started. So yeah, uh, yeah. So eat well and stay hydrated.